When he called Mexicans rapists, Republicans moved the line. When he mocked a disabled reporter, they moved the line. When he demeaned John McCain for being a POW and insulted a Gold Star family, they moved the line. When he bragged about grabbing women by the pussy, they moved the line. When he extorted Ukraine, shut down the government to pay for the wall Mexico was supposed to pay for, took his daddy Vladdy's side over our own intelligence agencies, said Nazis were very fine people, and praised murderous despots, they moved the line. When he bungled a pandemic, asked about injecting disinfectants, and golfed while thousands of Americans were dying a day, they moved the line. When he refused to accept the results of the election, plotted a coup, and incited an attack against our capital, they moved the line. When his gilded golf motel was searched by the FBI because he had our national security secrets in his effing bathroom, they moved the line. When he was indicted the first time, they moved the line. Then they moved it again, for the second, third, and fourth times. When he was found liable of sexual abuse, which the judge said could be referred to as rape, they moved the line. They moved it again when he was found liable of business fraud. And you'll never believe what they did when he was convicted 34 times. Yep, they moved the goddamn line. And now, his own chief of staff is telling the world that he idolized Hitler. We're learning he said he wished his generals were like Hitler's. The guy who said he'd be a dictator on day one wants his generals to be like Adolf Hitler's. The truth is that there isn't a thing he could ever do that they won't accommodate. He could set fire to the Declaration of Independence while boberting Putin and shouting death to America at the same damn time on a TikTok live, and they'd twist themselves into whatever goddamn kind of pretzels they needed to in order for it to not cross the line. Because they're cowards. They're craven, cuckolding cowards. And for them, when it comes to Donald Trump, there is no fucking line. Sometimes I cannot believe my life at 50 years old. This week I got to interview Jon Cryer, who, for somebody my age, will forever be Ducky Dale from Pretty in Pink. I worshipped that movie. I worshipped his character in that movie. It's an iconic character that holds up still to this day. I got to talk to him at 50. But one of the things I really respect about Jon is that he is not shy in sharing his opinions about Donald Trump because he recognizes what a threat Donald Trump is to this democracy, and he speaks out about it all the time. He's also producing a new podcast called The Man Who Calculated Death. It's on Wondery Plus, and it sounds incredible. You guys have to listen for that and then watch for that in the podcast. I'm really excited to check it out. So this was a total bucket list thing for me. I've watched it like several times because it was so fun, and I enjoyed every single second of this interview. I really hope you enjoy it too. Okay, you guys, I'm trying not to fangirl, which is not a good look for me, but this is very cool. I'm very excited to introduce to the Are You Effing Kidding Me podcast, because Jon, that is the name of my show.
Oh,
Jon
yes, I'm aware.
Jon Cryer is here, you guys. Jon Cryer is here, and I'm so excited.
Hey.
Oh my goodness, we just chatted for a little bit off recording, but welcome, Jon Cryer.
Thank you.
So nice to meet you.
Thank you. So glad to be here. So glad to be here.
I mean, we were just saying a little bit off recording that like this is very interesting to me because you and I probably never would have crossed paths in any way, shape, or form of any substance without the sort of collision of social media, but also these weird, topsy-turvy, to say the very least, times, these Trumpian affected times that we live in. But you are out there, in addition to all of your work on social media, really in the trenches and really advocating and fighting hard and giving it back and standing up. And that's how I became aware of your presence in that way. And it's really inspiring and awesome. But to meet you in this place is really interesting to me because I told you I was 12 when Pretty in Pink came out, and I've been a fan of yours for as long as I can really remember, never ever expecting that I would have a conversation with you when I was 50 about politics in addition to everything else.
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't want to be so active politically on social media when I first joined. If you look, the first few years that I was on Twitter, it was, I'd post a funny photo and I'd say, gosh, isn't it funny when your wife says bada, 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 or something like that? It was very, it was just pretty much daily stuff. And then Trump happened. And I grew up in New York City. So, I was subjected to decades of Trump coverage in the press. And, that one of the reasons that Trump is so unpopular in New York City is because we know him,
Yeah.
and he's been this ridiculous con man hustler for decades, with a little side of bigotry
Mm.
and ineptitude
Mm.
added to the mix. So once he started becoming a power politically, I felt like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to let Americans know that he's not the guy from The Apprentice.
Right.
He's actually a kind of an idiot.
Yeah.
And so I remember the first time I did it on a talk show, I think it was on The Real, and
Mm.
and for the first time, and you can sort of hear it in my voice, I was kind of tentative. I was like, guys, you may not want. One thing you have to know about Trump is he says every stupid thing that comes into his mind, and you do not want that as a president. And that was my first sort of tentative step out onto being more political. But it's funny because I deal with a lot of hostility online, because of the politics, and obviously I'd rather just be making fun entertainment for people. That's what I enjoy the most in my life, and I can understand why people get sometimes mad at celebrities, because they have an outsized influence
Mm.
from their fame. So people, it's like, it's not fair that your opinion means more than mine would, even though it doesn't
Right.
technically. And
Right.
one of the things about social media is it is in many ways a great, equalifier, because people, there's so many people that I never would have heard of,
Mm.
but they've said things on social media that I go, that yes, absolutely, they have absolutely hit the nail on the head with that particular thought.
Mm.
So, I've met a lot of wonderful people doing this, and and now I'm talking to you, which
Right.
is the logical conclusion of all this. Um,
Yeah.
but thank you for enjoying my stuff all the years.
Oh no, it's great. It's fantastic. And I think it's ironic for a lot of reasons that anybody would give a celebrity a hard time for weighing in on politics right now when they're literally trying to reelect for the second time somebody who essentially they became aware of because he was a reality TV game show host. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
I grew up in New Jersey too. Man, I remember Trump was everywhere, and you were just like, ugh, he's so icky, and he's icky in the pageants, and he was making fun of people's weight, and he was fighting with Rosie O'Donnell, and he was just icky. And when he came down that escalator, I remember exactly where I was. I was watching it at the gym. I had no sound on, and then I was like, I should probably listen to this, and I could put my headphones in. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm laughing, and then he says what he says, which is, Mexicans are rapists, and they're sending their drugs and all this other, and some of them, I suppose, are fine people or good people. And I was like, whoa, this is gross. Like this, first of all, it's
Yeah.
comical the way they came down the escalator and Melania gets on after him, and it's just like it's like seriously like something out of like Austin Powers. But so then he gets down there and it's just like vitriol, and you're like, oh. And then I thought,
Oh,
okay, Republicans are surely going to call this what it
yeah.
is, right?
He's going to flame out really quick, and this will be a fun little fling they have with this idiot,
Right.
but they'll tear him up,
Right.
and that is not what occurred.
Oh, no, I thought maybe it would have been a fun Trivial Pursuit question, like which candidate launched his presidential career coming down an escalator, and it'd be like, oh, I know that one. No, and then they kept moving the line and moving the line, and nothing ever crossed the line, and then now we're here. And so I wanted to ask you about, all of this and looking at this moment, 2 weeks out, we are somehow, it went from 9 months to 2 weeks like that, but here we are 2 weeks out, and I still, and maybe it's me being naive or just me not wanting to deal with reality sometimes, but I still really cannot believe we are here, that it is him again. The last several months since the debate with Biden, that has been a roller coaster. But just the arc of all of this is insane to me, that it was him to
Yeah.
begin with in 2016. All of the things that transpired, including the pandemic, he obviously bungled to say the least, and then the election. And now in 2024, he's a convicted felon. He's an adjudicated rapist. He's a business fraud. He's still the guy, still the same guy you were warning people about, if not
Yeah.
a lot worse. And
He
we're here.
presided over 4 years of chaos and division
Yeah.
and horror. The economy was in the toilet by the time he left.
Mhm.
And and yet here we are. Yes,
Right.
it is remarkable. I think a lot of it had to do with, unfortunately, the Republican Party has an enormous amount of money, and they decided we're going to go into, we're all in on this cult of personality. Yes, we all saw January 6th. We all hid in closets. We all, I was talking to the chief of staff of one of the Senate committees when I was in Washington, D.C., and she said it was scarier than 9/11. Because they were much more in specific terror for their lives. But all those same Republicans stood up and voted not to certify the election. And they could say, you have Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy both calling it an insurrection. And then saying, well, we shouldn't impeach him, and we shouldn't disallow him from holding office, because let's let the courts handle this. Constitutionally, what should have happened then was impeachment should have happened, and then he should have actually been impeached for this obvious insurrection, this obvious attempted coup. And then he should have been disallowed from holding federal office. That is the way that should, and then whatever legal things he dealt with afterwards would be dealt with afterwards. That's the way that the Constitution is set up, and the way things should have worked. But Republicans are in such thrall to their cult of personality that they all knew, they're not as delusional as Trump. Although he's surrounding himself with people who are willing to be that, but of course, J.D. Vance is just an absolute calculating sociopath. Again, it's horrifying that we're here. I'm sad about it for America. It's not the first time we've had cults of personality in America. It's not, our generation was we grew up post World War II in a worldwide order that was very anomalous. It was not the usual thing for the United States. The United States has been much more racist and chaotic for most of its time in existence than the post-war period. The post-war period gave us, the three networks where we all kind of trusted what the journalists were saying, and it was very sort of, and government was kind of, it gave us the Republicans who insisted that Nixon quit. Right. It gave us civil rights. It gave us an order that we could expect a certain amount of progress from, and that is a bit of an illusion. The United States hasn't been that way for 100 years before that, for 140 years before that. This isn't unprecedented in the United States, but it's super fucked up.
That's a great soundbite right there.
So hopefully we can, we'll see. We got 2 weeks to see, and even then, the fight is not over. I've said this a few times on Twitter. Trumpism is going to take a long time to defeat. I believe it will be defeated because it is a cult of personality, and they always run out of gas at some point. I'm hoping that it's this November 5th. But we'll see.
Yeah, they do usually flame out because they're so. They constrict, right? So they don't expand. They don't grow their base. This is a decidedly, an intentional choice that they've made. When people like Michael Steele and even Prince Rebus, whatever you say his name, they were all trying. Prince Rebus, whatever. He was not a prince. He's not a prince.
Riboflavin.
Ribbit. No, they were trying to expand the base, and the powers that be were like, no, we want to lean in on this cult of personality thing, and that's where they're at now. And they usually do flame out. The difference is, and I'm a little bit obsessed with reading, now books by Timothy Snyder and stuff about how democracies die and tyranny and of the minority, et cetera. Where you're like, oh, the one fundamental problem here is that the Republican Party has all these levers of power and these ways to cheat, where they found all the cracks and the fissures and the little openings in the democracy that we have that is so fragile to begin with, and no one really seemed to ever want to occupy those spaces or exploit them as much as they do. But they have found it's almost their singular mission, right? Because they know they can't win legitimately, because the society has evolved to a point where all societies do, that their hold on power that was based on their birthright, the way they see it, is bound to flame out, but they're like, no, we've got a few other tricks up our sleeve.
Yeah.
And this moment in time also feels a lot like, to your point, it feels a lot like the reaction to the systems towards something better that you were talking about, right? They were like,
Yeah.
oh, wait a minute, hold on. They're trying to do things that advance rights for Black people and
Wait a
women.
minute. We can have a black president? Wait. Hey, you guys, wait. And of course they would bristle at that. They're like, no. He had Omarosa.
He has Black friends. Yeah.
Yes, and they have young black politicians. They have Byron
Mhm.
Donalds, and they have you know uh, but in the end, whenever they're talking about we, they're talking about white people. And it's they don't. I don't know that they get it. A lot of them have couched it in religion. A lot of them feel that he's defending Christianity, which is hilarious to those of us who, like you and me, who grew up, in the New York City area.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
he's not a Christian. He doesn't go to church. He barely knows any of that. He's made that bargain with evangelicals, and I thought actually once they captured the Supreme Court, they'd lose interest in him, but no, they have maintained their interest in him.
Yeah, because now it's a war against
Yeah,
wokeness. It's a
yeah,
war against, others. And that's the thing that, again, going down those rabbit holes of history and seeing, the patterns here where maybe it doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly does rhyme. Like that's the key, right? Is in othering and making sure that there's always sort of this enemy or some threat to you that keeps you constantly like, but I need a protector, I need a strong man, I'm scared, I don't understand all this stuff. And that's where they come in. And that's been sort of so elemental to them leaning further into this cult of personality thing. And he's their warrior, which helps them literally vote against their own best interests, but also the thing about religion is so true. They bend themselves into pretzels to believe these things to
yeah.
accommodate their support for this person who embodies all of the seven deadly sins in one,
In one guy,
one guy, right? I call him
yeah.
one saggy senile septuagenarian because I love it.
Yeah.
I freaking love alliteration and I'm a dork. But like the things that they've had to do, and this were cults and dictatorships in the falls of democracy, they really do overlap. And we're like
Yeah,
living it in real time. And it's Donald Trump.
I know. It's just like you couldn't do better than that,
You know,
yeah, it's so funny, it's sad. But
terrifying.
but
Same
that's the
time.
thing. We do have to steel ourselves. He could win this. And do we? There's a lot of people like I'm leaving the country, and it's like okay,
Mm,
that's you have to protect yourselves. There are people in who I can see why women are leaving states that are banning women's reproductive health care. I see some. You have to protect yourselves. If you're in the trans community and you feel
yeah.
like wow, this has the culture has curdled in a way where I don't feel safe here anymore. I understand it. Um, so I get it. I've been trying to think long term and think, okay, we got to remember this is going to be a long fight,
Hmm.
and try to not make every moment apocalyptic.
Right.
Yeah, because
And
there's only so long before people just go, what, the last election was apocalyptic,
yeah,
and
it's really true. It's really true making that point. People are so fatigued. I mean, I think actually, and we can talk about this too, but I'm a Biden stan to like a fault. Like I'm a one of those really drank the Biden Kool-Aid, love the man, love the
mm,
man, and believe he still would have won. But like it's one of those things where when it was Biden Trump, a lot of more people, I would say, were like, you know what, like I'm that you said they were both, one was evil, one wasn't evil, whatever. Like I'm disengaging, I'm tapping out, I'm tired. You guys, you
mm,
keep wanting to talk about that January 6th thing. I don't want to talk about that. They were very much like disengaging and pulling away. And like I saw it in my son's 15 and he was giving me sort of a read on social media where he is, which is mostly TikTok and Snapchat and all
yeah,
those other ones. And he was like, Mom, people are tired of, they don't want to talk about this race. They're not excited. They don't care. And I was like, oh.
Mhm.
And then when the switch happened, he said the next day, he's like, whoa, mom, something is crazy. Something is going on TikTok where it's all like Kamala and joy and happiness, and people want to talk about this stuff. And then my daughter gets in the car and she's like, can you believe Ellie said something about Trump? And I was like, do you even know about Project 2025? And I was like, what?
What?
Right? Like I was like, you're 11. What did you say? She's like, it was on TikTok. I'm like, Project 2025 was on TikTok. But I think that fatigue factor is legitimate, was legitimate. And I think you're right about like, when we sound like we're being so hyperbolic that it's like, yeah, right. The sky is falling. You guys, the sky didn't fall. But it's like, guys, like, it's like, don't look up, it's like right there.
Yeah.
But I think there's a balance. But I think we have to figure out a way to sound the alarm while still making it engaging and exciting and like also like immediate enough that people do want to engage and get involved and vote, right? That's like the tricky balance.
Yeah. I actually was lucky enough to meet the president about 4 months ago. And I could see why it was such a difficult time for the Democratic Party because from my interaction with him was that he was a man who clearly was not suffering cognitive decline, but that he was having more difficulty communicating than he used to. He was speaking very quietly. He was repeating himself sometimes, but he clearly had a total grasp on. He was furious because a couple of days before they had just made the first argument for the immunity case, which they ended up winning, and he was very mad about that. Understandably, because it was bullshit and remains bullshit, and it remains a remarkable, horrifying low point for the Supreme Court. But he, there was not. But I could see why people, why the power brokers in the Democratic Party were really concerned. I can see why, because part of the job is the communication. And people kept saying, oh, he's cognitive decline. It's like, no, that's not what I observed. He was not, he's fine in that respect, but he is having a hard time getting it out there, and so, and so I was really impressed with him in meeting him, and I'm really glad that I got to. But I also, I've been a big fan of Kamala's for decades. I supported her run for Senate, and have met with her a couple of times, so I was always saying, we've got her right there. Yeah. She's right there, right. I am really hopeful. I think she's really talented and really really smart, and I think if anybody can do this, she can. I think there's one of the great things about the DNC actually was just seeing all these people coming up and speaking and going, oh my God, the Democrats have an amazingly deep bench.
Holy crap.
I mean, that's one of the reasons to stick around. Like, don't leave the country, because there's some great people coming up. And that was a big eye opener for me, that there was so many. I was like, gee. That guy's great. And that lady's great, and that guy's great, and that lady's great.
Right, you're like, where do I even start? Like, they're all, that guy could be president, or that woman could be president. My God, I see an attorney general over there. Like, it's just like, and I mean, that Wes Moore and Jocelyn Benson, Gretchen Whitmer, and I mean, you got Josh Shapiro, and of course there's Gavin Newsom just floating around out there, like, like this perfect god of like all things, and it is an incredibly deep bench. You're right. Stick around for that, because like to what you said before, that a lot of people saying they'll leave. Like I always joke, I'll be in a gulag. Like I'm trying to decide what cot I'm going to get, or like am I going to get the top bunk or the bottom. But democracies, they do. Not that this one should anytime soon, but they do fall. And in many cases, when they rebuild or build back, they build back better. Not to borrow a phrase from a certain fellow that we were just talking about, who I have met as well, and agree with you 1000% that he is 100% cognitive there. He's like dialed into every single person. Like he can walk away and know your middle name and your grandma's birthday. Like that's who he is. But I mean, it is certainly an extraordinary moment in time, and that the Supreme Court ruling that you mentioned, the immunity ruling, that goes way beyond. The implications of that go way beyond even just this election. But if this election goes the wrong way, potentially you're going to get that person's going to get 2 more picks. If it's Kamala, I'm going to say Clarence and Alito are going to hold on for dear life, to whatever they can to stay. But if it's not, that means Trump gets 2 more. That'll be Amy Coney Barrett's age, who will be a Supreme Court justice when my daughter has kids, if not, beyond. She's very, very young, and that's terrifying. That immunity decision goes back to the very first thing you were talking about when Mitch McConnell balked on impeaching, because Mitch McConnell is the reason he has two of those seats, because he stole Merrick Garland's seat, and then he did the exact same thing when he said they couldn't have Merrick Garland, putting in Amy Coney Barrett. So those 2 seats would not have been Trump's. Those 2 picks would not have been Trump's. They would have been Obama's and Joe's, but they're not. They're Trump's, and that was all McConnell. And then for McConnell to stand there and say this belongs in the courts, and then the courts weigh in, and their decision is that yes, he's above the law. He's basically a king. We're going to be a country to go back to a monarchy. Like, what?
Yeah, I was so furious because the rationalization, John Roberts' rationalization was a president needs to act boldly and unhesitatingly. The idea being that a president cannot be encumbered by having to think for even a moment, or consider what's legal for even a moment. And it's the dumbest thing. It's like that's the difference. A king does not have to worry about what the law is.
Right.
A president does. That is literally the difference. You boneheaded douchebag. I was so furious with him. I mean, because I know because he and Brett Kavanaugh all worked for Bush. And they felt like, the president is hindered by having to work within the confines of the law, and it's like, oh, that's disgusting. Of course the president is hindered by having to act within the confines of the law. Yes, that's what they have to do.
Right.
I believe that decision will go down in history as one of the worst. And it was really awful because he was trying to stop something that wasn't happening, which was Joe Biden pursuing Trump legally, by making it so that in the future somebody could absolutely do that. Right. He made it easier to weaponize the DOJ, and it's so infuriating because Trump still claims that it's being weaponized against him, when he did it himself. He got Jeff Sessions to investigate Hillary Clinton. He was calling for investigations daily, if you recall. So he, that his followers don't remember that is just like, wow, you guys, that is why when you get a lot of people who are deeply insulting to Trump supporters, because that's the root of it, is because do you guys just have no memory of things, because he's broken every promise he's made and every rule he could possibly break, and you guys still dig him. Why is that? Is it because he's an old white guy? Is that why? What is it? I don't know.
Right. These are the questions that I ask myself every day. I just as a binary choice, when you look at the 2 options in front of people, and you look at Trump's record, it's not hypothetical anymore. Like, we don't have to guess, what kind of a president he would be. We don't have to guess, but also he's gone so much further than that. He's telling us now, I'm not even going to be a president, I'm going to be a dictator, and he's going to be and people are like, don't take him seriously. He's Donald Trump's like, oh yeah, he said he was going to overturn Roe and punish women. Remember that? Oh, here we are in 2024. They overturned Roe and they're punishing women. Like, yes, take him seriously and literally. Like, stop doing that where you don't take him literally and seriously. I mean, this is that, but again, there is something, obviously there has to be something undergirding that support where they're able to say, oh yeah, he didn't say that Mexico was going to pay for the wall. He never said that. Like, he didn't say he was going to, any promise he made, make America great again. I don't even know. That's not even a measurable thing, but any of the promises he made that he never delivered on, he left with the worst jobs record since freaking Hoover. They call him the
Obamacare replacement was, that was going to be so much better than Obamacare. Nope.
Right. You didn't have concepts of a plan for that one. But it's, I guess, that cognitive dissonance that gets a lot of play, right? It's like they will just, the other part of it is also in those books, and obviously you know this better than a lot of people because you're very smart and you study history, but the dismantlement of truth and facts, and
Mm-hmm.
that's like Orwellian, power isn't tearing, the human mind into pieces and rebuilding it of your own making. Not exactly that quote, but essentially that quote. That's
Mm-hmm.
what's happening here. And that's another crucial piece in bringing them along to this place where it's like they don't even see the truth or facts, or, he can tell them they're eating the pets and that FEMA abandoned people in
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina. And it's factually and very easily disproven, but they don't care. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
like this, but this is this intentional by design sort of format that we've seen throughout history a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. America has always had this American exceptionalism that we are somehow different than anything that has preceded us. And of course we're humans. We're not.
Yeah.
This is a country. We've done great things. We've done horrible things. Like many countries, and we want one of the things that I do love about America is the ideals, is the constant iterations that we are constantly trying to go to something more perfect,
Mm-hmm.
something that is better. But I don't and again, as you were pointing out, there are states do come out of authoritarianism and fascism. It does happen. It's hard and it takes a long time, but it does happen. And so we just have to make sure that America has the equipment to get out of that, if it happens. But
Yeah.
the whole thing about Trump is that the reason Trump likes Vladimir Putin is because Vladimir Putin is, you know, king of a kleptocracy. He's the mafia king, and that's what Trump would like to be. He wants to turn the United States into a kleptocracy, that where he is the most powerful kleptocrat.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he admires Putin. And that is the source of their lovely relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a
And
rom
Putin.
com.
Yeah. It is a rom-com. It's a bareback horse rom-com, um,
Yes.
which is a visual no one needs. Sorry.
No.
Right. But that's the thing too. That's where he's bringing them. I'm not saying he's that strategic, but he's also not that stupid. Where he's bringing the
Yeah.
cult along, and he does this thing where it's a constant drumbeat of this new crazy thing. There's always one new crazy thing, like every day, every week, or whatever. And then everybody freaks out, like, oh, did he say he would let Russia do whatever they wanted to NATO allies?
Yeah.
And then everybody's like, what? I don't remember that. Like, what? And then he just brings
Hmm.
it. Now it's Putin and Xi aren't our real enemies. The enemy is within. The enemy is within. It's Nancy
Yeah.
Pelosi. It's Adam Schiff. And then we're all outraged. And then he moves on, and then he says it again. He sort of slides it in, and then he slides it in, and then he says, "I'm going to use the military to arrest them." And then you're like, it's always kind of moving everyone along to a point where that Vladimir Putin is a good guy. Vladimir.
Yeah.
Why can't I have a strong man like Vladimir Putin? And we're both Gen X, and we don't really know. We've never really lived in any kind of world where like we really had to consider what that would look like or feel like. Yeah, we had the Cold War and we were afraid of, Gorbachev for a while, or like what was going to
Yeah.
happen, and not that, but it's not this. It's not that this is that yet, but it wasn't a real thing for us in our minds where it has been for other generations that are like, oh, I know what it looks like to look at tyranny in the face. Like, I know what that looks like and feels like. We don't. So when people, you'll see MAGA at their rallies, like, yeah, I want a dictator. Yeah, that sounds real good to me. I think we need a strong man, somebody who breaks the rules.
Hmm.
You get it. You're like, well, because they've been sold this thing that isn't real. They wouldn't benefit under that, but that's where he's brought
Yeah.
them to. And that's why we out here are like
Hmm.
sounding the alarm. And this is different from other elections when people say this is just like all the others. It's not at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. I was watching a documentary about the 2000 election, 537 votes, which I was enjoying a lot. But it is interesting because when you think about how the United States could have gone had that
Mm-hmm.
gone the other way, and that's not to say Al Gore was perfect or anything, and we'd be living in paradise, And, no,
No.
he would have 9/11 would have happened under his watch in all
Mm-hmm.
likelihood, I don't know how he would have reacted. Very often, in many respects, like Hillary Clinton was very much a hawk, in terms of, demonstrating United States power and making sure that we understood the international order, and I don't live in a fairy tale land. I do feel like, environmentally we'd probably be in a lot better situation.
Yeah.
But the point I was bringing this was Ben Affleck at one point was interviewed back in 2000. He was talking about, this is the most important election of our lifetime. And I was like, oh Ben, you're practicing your lines for you're going to have to keep saying that because we keep having them.
Right. That was
But
back tattoo. Yeah.
yes. So at any rate, I'm very, again, everybody's on edge. It's frustrating because, we're seeing all these red wave polls right now, which are the same, we're getting the same crap polls that happened before 2022, which are just right-leaning polls where they out of nowhere, these polling outfits show up and they just happen to show Trump winning. It's like, what?
Maybe I'll stay home.
Yeah. So nationally, Harris is still ahead by a few points. What's terrifying is that the Electoral College means that is meaningless. That the majority of American voters is meaningless.
Yeah.
So I saw somebody mention, they said, because they were starting to look at possible Electoral College scenarios, and one of them was Harris losing the popular vote, but winning the Electoral College. And I was like, the great thing about that is Republicans would get rid of the Electoral College in about a month and a half if that happened.
I like that plan.
That would be, frankly, the ideal scenario.
Yeah. Or we could name the Electoral College after like a woman's reproductive organ, like,
yes.
like
and then they get rid of it.
We definitely get rid of it. It's interesting though, because in these times, like I'm a total geek for history, and I look back at history, and I find it both somehow comforting and alarming, but also like gives me a sense of order, that things can always come back and recover, et cetera, et cetera. And we've seen the darkest of history over, the span of everything we've been recording. And you have produced a historical podcast that is a true story, The Man Who Calculated Death. And I want to talk about that because it's a fascinating story based on the trailer. How did it come to you? How did you become aware of it? And also, what do you think? How does it echo where we are now, if it does at all? What lessons can we take from it, if there are any to take at all?
Yeah, well, it's a crazy story how it came to be. A friend of mine is a woman named Suzanne Rico, and she's very close with my wife. They've been friends for decades. And she was throwing a birthday party for me, and she knew I was kind of a space nerd. I love the space program and the history of the space program. It's all very fascinating to me. And she said, "Oh, my grandfather worked on the space program." I was like, "What? Oh, wow, that's cool." And she said, "Yeah, before that, he worked for Hitler." But anyway, and she threw that out, and I was like, "I'm sorry, wait." The Hitler, or was it like Steve Hitler, a different? And she said, no, the Hitler. And at that point, she was in the middle of this incredible project. What had happened was her mother had recently passed away, but on her deathbed, her mother said, "I've been writing a memoir for the last 5 years, but I'm not going to be able to finish it because I'm dying. Can you finish it for me?" And Suzanne was like overwhelmed with this whole project. But the memoir was about growing up in Nazi Germany while her father was one of Hitler's most important scientists. He was creating a secret super weapon for Adolf Hitler, what ended up being called the V1, which was the first cruise missile, and absolutely terrified and terrorized England. And he revolutionized warfare, absolutely. But so Suzanne started looking into her family's history and how this family in Nazi Germany came to America, and what had always, she had always known that her mother was surviving PTSD, but she never knew her mother never it was never clear exactly what it was, and she found out that it was that her mother was in a house that was bombed, and it killed her mother literally in front of her eyes.
Mm.
But it was always a mystery because it happened at the end of the war, and they didn't know who did it or why, and they were out in a farmhouse in the middle of Bavaria, so Suzanne went back and investigated her whole and had all these amazing revelations about her family in Nazi Germany, and how this family went from being a normal family of a scientist to to being complicit in part of the most horrifying aspects of the war.
Mm.
So it's a fascinating story of a family as fascism and authoritarianism take over their country, and how the changes happen. But mostly it's a mystery story because Suzanne ended up figuring out the mystery. She found out who bombed the house and why. Suzanne is a wonderful writer, and she was an anchor woman here in Los Angeles and a journalist on the local CBS affiliate here. But she's done a wonderful, wonderful job on it, and I'm just a producer. I'm just such a history nerd. I was just consumed by the project. And it's coming out November 6th, the day after the election, on Wondery Plus, and it's exclusively there. But I'm so proud of it, and she really it was a very brave journey for her.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, that's not like, lots of families have their secrets. That's a tough one. It's not like, yeah, my mom had an affair. It's like, my dad made, cruise missiles for Hitler. Like, yeah. But it is interesting because for me, one of the lingering questions from when I was a kid, first ever learning about the Holocaust, I was like, I just don't understand how they got regular people, normal people, to go along with all of this, you know what I mean, to acquiesce and to become complicit, like the scientists and the doctors. And how did they convince these soldiers to shoot people in ditches? And like that question has nagged me forever, and now my kids are learning about it and they're asking the same questions, and this podcast really kind of speaks to that, because
absolutely,
it's very resonant of this time in our history too, because it's what we are sort of both living in on the precipice of seeing. So that's awesome, that timing and the overlap there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting also because we perceive World War II literally in black and white. We there was good guys, there was bad guys. It was apparent who was the good guys and who were the bad guys right away. But it wasn't. There were many shades of gray. Hitler based some of his early laws that were deeply racist. He based them on American laws. He loved that we were segregated. In America, we had the very popular science of eugenics, which Hitler adopted in many respects. We'd love to sort of think, the bad guys started doing a horrible thing. It was absolutely apparent, and we came in and saved the day. And it's like, well, not in any way to denigrate the amazing people who won World War II, but it wasn't. History is always complicated.
Yeah.
And because we're human beings,
right.
And it is the man who calculated death is a fascinating story of a family that is not, they're not racist, they're not anti-Semitic, they're just normal people. In fact, the father is brilliant. They're smart people, they're successful people, and how they, how their daily life just gets incrementally different, and how sooner before you know it, you're participating in something that you can't imagine.
Right. And it also sort of echoes history. And then a lot of people during that time period here in America were isolationists, and they didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to intervene.
America first.
Right. They didn't think, right. So much of this rhymes, right? They didn't think it was in our best interest. And obviously, I would argue, and I think most people would argue, it was in the world's best interest for us to intervene. But we're facing that same question now when we look at Ukraine, et cetera, where people are saying, oh, no, that's not our problem. but history is very informative in this way. So yeah, that these things come back up and that we get to re-examine the past so that we have sort of a blueprint for maybe what we should do differently is a good thing. We didn't really have that with the pandemic, which we could have used, but
Yeah.
we have it in this moment. So, and this podcast is, I'm really excited to listen to it. So I'm definitely going to check that out. You said, where is it going to be? In
Wondery Plus, you got to join.
Wondering.
Wondery Plus is worth it because they have a lot of great ones, and you get to hear them without commercials, which is
Ooh, okay.
primo. I am a member of Wondery Plus, but we are exclusive to Wondery Plus for the first 4 months,
Oh,
and so.
okay. I'm going to get that. I don't have that. I'm going to get that just so I can listen to this and hopefully other things too. Well, thank you for this conversation. One quick question before you go, because you're in LA. Are you a baseball fan?
Not a casual baseball fan. I enjoy it when I see it,
Okay.
and obviously very exciting for the Dodgers, the LA just lights up when this kind of stuff is happening.
Yeah.
Anything that brings people together, I like. But I'm from New York City,
Yeah.
so this is,
Yeah.
there's a certain internal. But I was a Met fan
Oh,
growing up because
right.
they won the World Series in
Dwight Gooden,
1969
Daryl Strawberry.
and 86.
Yeah.
That I Yankees I can dredge up some enthusiasm for.
My Garrett Cole bobblehead. This is his Cy Young bobblehead.
Oh.
I love it. Love me the Yankees something fierce, but I'll tell you this much real fast. I was a Mets fan during that time period too, and my son made me change so that he wouldn't root for the New Jersey Devils, and I could get him to root for the Rangers because you could be a monster to root for the Devils. I'm so sorry, but it's an
I
expansion.
understand.
Um, yeah, but I really fast. So I've been able to meet now, not meet. I did not meet Daryl Strawberry, but I did see him, which was crazy for me at the 9/11 memorial, which was wild because everybody left
Okay.
him alone, thank God, and gave him his space, which was good. But I was like, oh my gosh, there's Daryl Strawberry. I'm at the 9/11 memorial. Like I can't say there's Daryl Strawberry. But then I went to a Yankees game with my son and his friend when they were like 12 or so, and we were in the Hard Rock Cafe, and Dwight Gooden walks by, and I was like, there's Dwight Gooden. And I was like, I have to meet Dwight Gooden. Like, I mean, this is like my hero. So I go up to Dwight. I got the kids with me who don't know who he is, not real students of baseball. So I say, hey, Dwight, oh, do you think we can get a picture? And he's like, oh, sure. Come on, kids. And I was like, oh, okay.
I meant we could get a picture. F the kids. They could care less.
I'm like, okay, sure. Okay, thanks, Dwight. And the kids are like, oh my God, yeah. So that's the most Joe story ever. Yep, Dwight, if you're out there, I'd love to get a picture, just take a chance at that. But yeah, Jon Cryer, this was amazing. It's so nice to meet someone that you think you can. We didn't even get to Pretty in Pink, which is crazy because, like, again, Ducky is a very special character for so many people in my generation. My girlfriends right now are like, oh God. And it's you, and again, it always seemed like it was an extension of who you were just inherently. And everyone who's I've ever met that's met you has said, no, he's just like a genuinely nice guy. So meeting you virtually and finding that to be true is very restorative and like,
Oh,
you know,
good.
yeah, you could be a total asshole. You know, you could have been the dickhead playing the nice guy who gets the girl when we would all be like, wait, he was really the James Spader? Wasn't the real no. Yeah.
James Spader, also a nice guy. Hate to
Very good
break
at
it to
playing a
you.
bad guy, though.
Yes,
My
great.
God.
Oh my God.
That was a
Great.
good bad guy. That was a really
Absolutely.
good bad guy.
No, we used to do scenes together, and they would get cut, and I'd be like, dude, that was amazing.
Like, really? Do you think it was good? Did you like it? Do you want to go get
Yeah,
an
no,
ice cream?
he was great, and he was very friendly. Interestingly, I got along with him, but I did not get along with Andrew McCarthy at the time.
No shit.
What I now understand was he was already dealing with alcoholism, which he writes about extensively in his excellent book Brat, by the way, if I may plug something else.
Mm,
But it's fascinating because it really goes to show you that I just did not get what he was going through at the time.
yeah.
And I just thought, wow, this guy's kind of standoffish and remote. And I was used to, theater where you're a family and everybody's working together and you have to do a show every night and you have to depend on everybody. And films aren't like that.
Yeah.
You show up on the day and you do your work and then you go home, and you don't. It's different.
Different.
and he and so when he asked me to do the Bratz documentary, I was like, okay, now we can talk this out, I guess. And it really was lovely. It was a great chance to sort of get some real perspective on he had all kinds of issues with his dad, and he was already dealing with enormous anxiety issues, and he was and depression, and so he was using alcohol to get through that. And it's a shame, because he was like 22 or 21 when we shot that. When
Oh
you're
my
already
gosh.
dealing with that, it's really really tough. But
Yeah.
obviously he's doing great now.
Yeah, that's great. And it's a metaphor for this moment as well, because like you said about baseball, like, people connecting in that humanity and finding that there's, we don't know everything about everybody else, and it's not all just right there at the surface. And if you take the time and explore, what it
Mm-hmm.
really, a person's nuances, you're going to find something that you didn't know that's going to surprise you, but it's also going to explain a lot of things and maybe connect you to them in the end. And that
Yeah.
seems to be the antidote to a lot of the divisiveness and anger and vitriol and hate that is happening right now. So it's a really good
Yeah.
metaphor for that as well. Something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I
Well,
agree. Well, so lovely talking to
it was
you.
so lovely talking to you. Thank you so much. This is like, I'm like, wait, I'm gonna get to talk to Jon Cryer. Really? So cool. And now I've always been a fan of yours on social media. So now I'm just like, hey buddy, hey Jon, it's me, Jon, your replies. Remember we met that time on the screen? I promise I won't make this weird. But you do look different when you're sleeping. I'm just kidding. You don't. I don't know. I don't actually know, because you have the shades down all the time. It's so annoying. But no, seriously, this is such a joy. And thank you so much for all of your time, and all of your work in advocacy, and just all of the breadth of your work as an actor. It's you've given a gift to the world. So one we hopefully will be able to repay you in democracy sustaining itself.
Yes, yes. Thank you, America, for repaying me with democracy
I'm
on
doing this for
November
Jon
5th.
Cryer. I'm doing this for Jon Cryer. Pretty in Pink. All right. Well, this concludes this episode, this really fun episode of the Are You Effing Kidding Me podcast. This was probably top 2, top 3 for all of the ones I've ever done. Such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. Thanks
Thank
again, Jon
you.
Cryer. People look for him on socials. Look for him. Or are you doing any projects other than the podcast right
Not
now?
not right now. Taking
Okay.
just getting that out, and then we'll
Okay.
see what happens.
Psyched for this. The Man Who Calculated Death. That is going to be riveting. Okay. Well, thanks again, Jon. Thanks everybody else. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.